Hey, Dad.
Hey, how you doing today?
Good. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Joel
And
with my
I'm
dad.
Rick.
Yeah.
And here we are.
We
What
are.
are we going to do today?
Well, we're the whole year we're talking about conquering mountains, and with this specific month, we're kind of talking about seasons of life and how life happens in seasons. And I was thinking about how there are certain seasons I think that feel more lonely than others.
Oh,
And I want to talk about loneliness.
okay.
Because I've been thinking about it a lot for some reason. They say that people have never been lonelier. We feel more, they say we're more connected with social media, but if you look at the data, people are just lonely, lonely, lonely. And I think the pandemic sped that up a little bit or increased that, the feeling of separation. And maybe we haven't, I don't know. So
Well,
it's interesting because as an introvert, you're one as well.
yeah.
I kind of like being alone.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between loneliness and feeling alone.
Yeah.
And being alone, excuse me. You can be alone and not feel lonely. But loneliness is, I think, like this kind of aching thing that maybe nobody understands you, or that you're separate from other people in some way. You can't find a connection point. I think it has more to do with feeling connected and understood than it does about being actually away from people.
Yeah, I think so too. And I remember when the pandemic hit and we were all locked in our houses, I'm thinking, wow, this is like a dream come true, And it was for a few days, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. And then after that, all of a sudden I began to realize, wow, we really do. I had always thought of fellowship and the connection in the body of Christ as kind of being the icing on the cake, Well, it's nice, and it's the thing that kind of draws us all together. And more people are interested in that than really learning the word and all that. But wow, I began to see the real value of it. Just the idea of those coals being together, and you take one coal out and it just quickly grows cold rather than drawing life from one another. So like you say, the pandemic really did make a difference. Maybe it just pointed out how lonely we are. And you're saying people are feeling more lonely. I was hearing a guy the other day on, I don't know, something or other, and he was saying, oh, we don't, as part of the problem in my generation, he was a young guy, is that we don't have those old places that people used to come together. They would come together in the pubs, and they would come together in the smoking lounges, and they would come together in the, and I'm thinking, yeah, we still have those places. I don't know why you're not finding them, but church is the best place to do that. But obviously he wasn't involved in a community in that way. And so he was having a hard time finding a place to connect with people.
Yeah, I do think it is more about connection. So I was thinking about, I'm like, what creates loneliness? And the first verse that came to my mind is Proverbs 18:1. It says, he who isolates himself seeks his own desire. He breaks out against sound judgment. And at first glance, it seems like Solomon is saying, if you're lonely, it's your own fault. There's another version of it. The NIV says, an unfriendly person pursues selfish ends, and against all sound judgment starts quarrels. I'm like, what a weird translation of that.
Yeah.
But it is this idea of kind of separation from others. And I've noticed whenever I'm separated from others, you immediately tend to assume the worst about other people.
Right.
You've probably seen that where you're like, oh, I know they're thinking this about me because they did that. And really, they're not thinking about you at all.
Yeah.
But it's this tendency we have when we separate ourselves from others, or we're away from someone, that you kind of immediately start to think the worst about somebody. Even people love you, you start thinking, oh, they're doing that.
Yeah.
And I wonder if part of the challenge with isolation is it compounds, right? As you're separated from people, you start thinking even worse things of people. I think about, was that the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, holed up in a shack out in Montana, and he wrote this whole manifesto about how bad humanity is. And I think about that a lot of times with people that say, I'm going to separate myself from society and come back a hero. I'm like, actually, I don't know that you can do that, separating yourself, because again, your natural bent goes towards vain imaginations is one of the things it talks about in spiritual warfare. We cast down vain imaginations. Our mind tends to go bad places when we're separated from other people.
Yeah.
And what's your take on that?
Well, exactly. I hadn't even thought of that, but it reminded me of this fellow I used to work for, a pastor I used to work for, loving, kind, just generous. But he would be gone for weeks at a time. We'd only see him to preach on Sunday. And I remember when I get frustrated, I was working for him, and I get frustrated with my job or something. I'd think about him, and I'd think, oh man, blah, 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 and all those negative things. And then as soon as I'd see him and go, what was I thinking? This guy's a big teddy bear, man. He loves me. He cares about me. And yeah, it can do that. I kind of say this, I know sometimes people say in a marriage or something, they separate, and we have this saying that absence makes the heart grow fonder. And I've added a second phrase to that because here's what I've seen. Yeah, absence makes the heart grow fonder. But if it's too long, it makes the heart begin to wander. And you begin to kind of...
Well, that could apply to church too, couldn't it?
Yeah, true, exactly.
Yeah.
I've seen it in marriages where, okay, maybe a separation for a little while, but after a while you begin to kind of, as you say, you begin to think the negative, you begin to only see the negative, and you begin to kind of wander off a little bit, and it doesn't really draw you together much.
Yeah, that is a good point. That's what Paul says, don't forsake the assembling of yourselves together as some have become accustomed to doing. When you're apart from that, well, you talked about growing cold for one in your faith, but also it's the idea of those people, I know what, church isn't doing it right because of this and that, but when you're involved in making something happen, it's a lot harder to critique it because you see the complexity of the issue. And I think that happens in relationships too. When you isolate yourself, it's easy to fix the problems, right? Because you're like, I'm separated from it. But when you're in the throes of it, in the mix of the complicated aspects of relationships, you realize this is a lot more complicated than I thought it was, but it also pulls love out of you. I mean, I've said that a bunch, and some people don't understand what they mean when I say this, but I say you and Jesus may have it all worked out, but it's how you live with others that proves it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's scripture too, where he said, how can you say you love the Lord if you don't love those that you see, those that are there?
I've been thinking about that a lot, 1 John 4, about this idea of what is Philadelphia, what is brotherly love. And it's like, you can love Jesus all you want, but if you can't love people, Jesus like, no, you don't actually love me.
That's that old poem, oh, to dwell above with saints we love, won't that be glory? But to live below with saints we know, well, that's another story. It's such I did something stupid this week. I responded to a Facebook post,
Why?
Well, why? I know. That's why I asked. Why?
I'm assuming it was a negative one.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like, you're so insightful, Rick.
Yeah, no, it wasn't that. Okay. No, some Christian guy had posted things about, the church is this and the church is that. And I said, man, it just always troubles me when we're always talking about the church. They. I thought you were part of us. You're either in the boat or you're out of the boat. And if you're in the boat, then fix the problem and don't be griping about it because you're part of the problem. You are part of it. And anyway, it didn't go well after that.
So we're not sounding here, but
yes,
I want to talk about that. Like, what are the things that, Carl Jung, he said that what causes loneliness is feeling like people don't understand you. Mm-hmm. And I think that is I think that there's a reality that sometimes people aren't going to understand you. Yeah. I was talking with Emily yesterday, and I was trying to express to her that I want to relate to the pain she's feeling, but I can't use the right words apparently. So it just gets her frustrated because she's like, you don't understand. I'm like, I'm trying to understand, but I just don't, because I don't think that way. I don't process the world that way. And it's not that I don't love you. It's just I don't process the world the way you do. And I think in some ways we have to have grace for people who are trying to understand us. I think about that with if you're going through grief, somebody who hasn't been through grief, lost someone, they're gonna just say dumb stuff and they're gonna think dumb stuff, and you're gonna feel even increasingly separated from them. But we have to have, even in our own loneliness, an element of grace for people that they know. The only person that's going to fully understand you is Jesus himself, right?
And nobody can, because we all have different experiences. We all have different. And again, out of love, as you said, a lot of times out of love, we say really stupid things, out of trying to understand.
Job's friends,
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure that was out of love. I'm not sure with friends like that.
I mean, you give them the benefit of the doubt, and maybe.
Yeah. Job would have been better off to be lonely.
I mean, I've been Job's friends at some point,
Yeah, I think we probably all have. Particularly we just had one of our missionaries pass away, a young man, and the pastoral care is going, what do I say? What do I do? There's nothing you can say. You just cry with them. That's all you can really do. That's the wisest thing you can do at a funeral, is just cry with the people, and because you can't understand, and you don't know what they're going through. Even if you went through something similar, it's different for them.
Yeah.
There's always differences.
So I want to talk a little bit about the idea that sometimes God will allow seasons of loneliness for us to kind of separate ourselves from dependence on people. I've also been thinking about that in terms of 1 John 4, right? it's the whole love one another verse, right? Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone that loves is born of God and knows God. Who does not love
Doesn't know God.
doesn't know God, right? So, but I've been thinking about that idea that oftentimes you can't really love people properly until you don't need them for some sort of affirmation, until you're literally connected. I mean, this is going to sound so preachy, but until you're literally connected vertically with God, you can't love properly horizontally, which makes a cross. Isn't that amazing how that works?
That is preachy, man. That's really,
But
I'm usually the one doing the preaching. What are you doing?
But it's a really powerful image, I think, because a lot of times our own fear of not being accepted by others actually keeps us from being able to love people in the way they need to be loved, because it makes it all about us.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes God will allow separation, a desert season, a wilderness season, for us to develop strength within us that we need people, but we are only going to get what we really need from God himself. And out of that, we become a source of life to others. And as we're a mutual source of life to each other in community, we actually truly have a healthy community where when somebody's down, you can pick them up. When you're down, they can pick you up. But what happens a lot of times is I think and again, I have to say this carefully because it starts to think, well, you can't love somebody until you don't need them. Well, you're not autonomous. We're made to need people. But if that is an unhealthy need where we're trying to get things from people that they can't get, our spouse can't provide us everything we need, our friends can't provide us everything we need, it's only going to come from God. Oftentimes, I think God will allow seasons of loneliness so we begin to depend on him and realize really nobody is going to fully understand us. And we have to lean on him for that understanding.
Well, yeah, not every biblical character, but so many biblical characters did experience loneliness. I mean, David, when he had to be left by his family and things like that. And I mean, Jesus, the ultimate loneliness is, my God, why have you forsaken me? I mean, you don't get any lonelier than all the people have left you. All your friends have left you. You're on the cross. Your mom's there looking at you, but even God himself has abandoned you. None of us have experienced that. And so it's, I think, there was a song that came out. I was thinking about us, and, when I was younger, that's when I experienced a lot of loneliness and things like that. And I dealt with it differently than probably you did. I wasn't that insightful. And there was a song that came out in probably the 60s or early 70s by Paul Simon. I'm sure you've probably heard it. I Am a Rock. Mm-hmm. And in this song, it's, I'm an island. I don't need anybody. I've built my walls and I keep myself. And it's really a sad song. But when I first heard it, I thought, boy, that talks about me. I didn't think of it as a sad song at the time because of my upbringing. It was kind of my upbringing was kind of a rage against the machine. I'm a victim, and I'm building my walls and keep myself protected. That kind of thing. And but it sure expressed it. And I thought, that's the kind of thing though that when you build those walls to protect yourself, you're keeping other people out and you're keeping yourself locked in. And so it is essential that we connect with other people. And I mean, there's no better place to do that than at church. And I know we got all the bad things. Oh, church is full of hypocrites, isn't that? And so you join them and there'll be one more hypocrite in the group. But the point is, there you're going to find people who, they're flawed, but at least they have a goal of becoming better, and they've not settled into that. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be an isolationist. I'm going to be me against you and raging against the machine and all that. And so I just, again, that not forsaking the assembling yourselves together.
Yeah. And maybe that is the cure for loneliness is you're never going to, recognizing, first of all, you're never going to be fully understood.
And you don't just need Jesus.
Right. Yeah.
You need other people as the Lord is manifested through them.
But also recognize that maybe if you don't feel understood, there's something people still have to offer you, even if it's that, again, it's kind of our own narcissistic arrogance. Nobody understands me completely.
Understood. Yeah, exactly. And why don't, maybe it's better if you begin to understand other people and try to understand them and get out of your own little cesspool. And you might find that there's life and living water on the other side of that.
So last kind of thought I was thinking about in terms of loneliness, if you're feeling lonely in your marriage, give us some advice.
Well, it's and that's easy to do. It's easy to feel lonely in a group of people too. But I think and this is much easier said than done, but talk about it with your spouse. First of all, you got to figure out yourself what it is you're feeling and why you're feeling that. And that's something that I've kind of learned, is that I'm not one that self-examines very much. And I need to, first of all, figure out what's going on in my heart. And then if I can share that, because what typically happens is, guys particularly, we get angry, we get frustrated, angry. And then we respond in anger. Well, my wife can't do anything with that. But if I go, look, I'm hurt, I'm feeling lonely, if I can share that with her, then all of a sudden she can develop some empathy and perhaps help meet that need that I have. But I first of all have to know what's going on inside of me so that I can communicate it. And anger is not the way to communicate it, because she can't do anything with that.
Thanks for listening. Please consider sharing this with your friends on the platform of your choice. For more from Joel Malm, visit joelmalm.com. For more from Rick Malm, visit rickmalm.com. Our podcast music was produced by Alex Burleson.